with Roy Lopez Jr.
Hey, fellow Facebookers and YouTubers out there, this is Roy Lopez Jr. with Southtown Comedy Radio. And you know what, folks? Today we're going to have a very, very special, this is a special edition. And the interview was so good and so long, I want to bring you the whole interview. So we're going to break it down into 3 parts. Our special guest today is Jesse Pangelinan. And sitting in with me while I was interviewing him was our own producer, Richard Zee Rodriguez. And I'm going to tell you something, folks. It's amazing. These shows usually last about 10, 15 minutes. We were on almost a whole hour, and everything was just fantastic. So we're going to break it down in a couple of parts, and we want you guys to tune in and listen. Okay, what I want to do also is I want to share with you some upcoming events that we've got going on. Of course, Southtown Comedy has been at the Blue Star Brewery on first Saturdays of every month, so that's right around the corner. That's May 2nd, and our headliner for that is none other than Larry Garza. So you guys, this guy is part of one of the funniest duos in the state of Texas, and unfortunately, our budget, we could only afford one of them, so that's not true. We could afford 2 of them at half the price. But anyway, Larry is sure to deliver on that show. Then, of course, we've got June the 6th, and I think we're working on that lineup, as well as July the 4th. Now, I don't want you to forget June the 21st will be at Blue Star as well. And that is a fundraiser for the Alzheimer's Association. We're going to do, that's called The Longest Day. It's the summer solstice. And we're going to do a comedy show that will last from sunup to sundown. And it's going to be fantastic. We're getting everybody ready here. We might even have a few auditions. I'll keep you posted on when we have those auditions. If you guys want to come out and actually be on the show, I think it should be fantastic. So you guys, please tune in. I want you to hear all 3 parts. We'll start off with part 1, and then we'll be back after the break. Today's guest.
A special edition.
Is it?
It's a special edition.
It's a special edition because, you know how they say, if Muhammad can't go to the mountain will come to Muhammad? Well, we're here at Mount St. Christus with our good friend and comedian Jesse Pangelinan.
Yeah. And I'm here too, by the way.
I just want you to know that our producer is actually Richard Z. Richard Z. Rodriguez is in.
I might be interjecting things.
Somebody actually gave him permission to speak, so we're here.
The producer gave him permission to speak. So
there we go.
Just to add a little bit more comedy.
Okay, so anyway, where was I?
Muhammad is bringing something.
You shouldn't bring the Muslims into this.
You really shouldn't, man. Because
there's people out there that just don't like this.
You're finally going to get your TV credit on CNN.
Speaking of TV credits, Jesse, you've been in the you've probably one of the longest reigning comedians that I've met personally. How long have you been in the comedy scene?
I've been doing this week tomorrow, which should be on April
tomorrow
20 something. It marks 20 years.
20 years of doing stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's a long time, man. And you've done stuff. Let me tell you something about him. You might not know this, Richard.
I don't.
Jesse has, you think of it local. Now he's originally from Austin, right? You spent a lot of time in Austin. You moved to San Antonio. You got married with my ex-girlfriend, and we'll talk about that later. But you've not just done comedy in the state of Texas. You've gone to some places.
Yeah, I've been in 42 of the 50 states.
Wow.
42 of the 48. And I've performed in 8 foreign countries. Japan, Korea, Bahrain, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba.
What?
Yeah, Honduras.
Wow.
Canada. I've been.
So is it safe to say that you're fluent in 8 different languages as well?
It's safe to say that.
Comedy.
Oh, okay.
It's safe to say that a Mexican's got a legal document to get me back.
That's amazing. They didn't keep you in Guantanamo Bay? That's the amazing. That's the story right there.
We actually performed about, I would say, maybe 200 feet from where the the prisoners were being kept.
Are you serious? Were they
Yeah.
were they caged?
They are not caged. They're inside.
They had access to the stage?
Kennels.
Yeah, they're kind of like kennels, is what they were. Like, when they were
Man
in.
kennels.
You been there, Richard?
On the internet. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You should check it out. So, yeah,
No. There's some places I don't want to go to. That's one of them. I'd just rather hear about it.
So Mahali Mahalama did not. I don't think he liked me. He either said his name or he spat. I wasn't really sure. So.
Again.
Yeah.
That's amazing, though. And you some of these were through the USOs.
Yeah,
right?
through the USO, Armed Forces Entertainment, and it's MWR.
I would imagine you have to be at a certain level for them to even consider taking you over there.
You got to be able to work any kind of room. I've literally done. I've done everything from 8 people in a cafeteria in Bahrain to 300 people in Guantanamo Bay.
Wow.
On a patio.
Talk about a captive audience.
Yeah. They got nothing to do, man. Especially, I went to Djibouti.
What?
Djibouti,
Oh,
exactly.
Djibouti.
Oh, hey, I was going to say, hey, man, let's not get personal there, brother. Leave Richard out of this.
8 miles from the Somali border.
He said Jay's booty.
Really?
Yeah, so they're on high alert all the time.
Wow. And what's the reaction? I mean, I've heard your set, so I know that you're funny. I mean, were they... did they sit there with their arms folded, or did they actually get involved?
They get into it. They really do. The officers, not so much.
Well, they're concerned with what these guys are going to do, right?
And then the regular people, the regular army guys.
I'm curious about something. I know for a fact that you've received several standing ovations at your performance, because it was actually in one of them, and I got everybody started. And I only stood up to go to the restroom. So it just happened to be at the end of your show. But for instance, the people there in Guantanamo, did you get a standing ovation?
In Guantanamo Bay, I didn't get a standing ovation. In Djibouti, I did.
Really?
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean,
you're not performing for the prisoners, though.
No, it wasn't actually performing
it's
for
just
them.
the American.
Yeah, it was for the servicemen.
Okay,
so
I just wanted to make sure.
yeah.
Oh, I see. I thought all these guys were chained up.
Couldn't stand.
They couldn't leave if they wanted to. That's why I said captive audience. Right? That's amazing. I mean, just that alone. I mean, not to mention the probably thousands of clubs you've done shows at throughout the United States.
I have worked every kind of. I did a room in, I think it was Moorhead, Minnesota. There were 6 people at a folding table. And I was at the front of the folding table, and 6 people just sat behind it, and
you did your show.
And I did my show.
The show goes on. Hey, you were getting paid. Well, that reminds me of one of the what I think is one of your funniest jokes is where you've done more. You've performed more people, and that was just at home. How does it go? Something about the
if there's 12 people in the audience, it's like I live with more people than.
I want to know about 20 years ago, Day. Were you doing comedy in Austin or in San Antonio?
It was in Austin, and I will never forget it either. I went to a comedy club with some friends, and the comedians that went up that night, they had a bad night. Now, I had no idea that a bad night it's just a bad night. You get up there, and for whatever reason, you don't interact with the audience the way that you should. But to me, the comedians sucked. That's what I thought. And I told one of my friends, I said, man, I could do better than that, I think, because I thought I was kind of funny. And a buddy of mine said, well, they have a comedy class here. It's called Comedy Gym, and you should give it a shot. And so I went ahead and went out to one of those classes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's probably the first time you've ever been to a gym, right?
It's the only time
okay.
I've ever been to a gym. Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't pass that up, Jesse.
And this Comedy Gym, it's actually had some pretty famous people come out of it. Greg Warren. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him. Billy D. Washington.
Oh, yeah, Billy D. Billy D. Williams.
No,
I'm sorry.
Billy D. Washington.
Oh, I know. I know
Billy D. Williams.
Yeah.
But you'll know the third one. Seth Rogen.
Oh, of course.
Wow.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
He's from Texas?
So you're saying you got to start there?
You got to start in the Comedy Gym, yeah.
What'd you ask? He's from Texas?
He's from Texas.
No, it's actually from Vancouver.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's Canadian.
Yeah, he's Canadian.
Right. Oh, Canadian.
And we actually did a show in Vancouver.
Hey?
Yeah.
Hey, Hoser? Hey? Well, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, so,
And then now Jesse Pangelinan.
and 20 years later, it turned into this.
So when did you move to San Antonio?
I moved to San Antonio last year, 2014.
Oh, I thought you've been around.
No.
No.
But, I consider myself a San Antonio comic. I really do.
Well, we don't.
And I've actually seen your set before several years ago. At the time that you retired, the first time or third time or fifth time or whatever. I think you're like the most retired comedian that I've seen. And only because this was the time when I first met you.
In comedy, it's retread. Isn't it retread, not retire?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, or we rolled over. Yeah. So tell us a little bit why. Tell us that those times that you. Let's start with the first retirement and work our way up. What happened there? What made you want to retire back then and come back and come?
People like you, Richard.
People like me.
You know what it was is it's not easy being a road comic. It's really not. I honestly believe that there are 7 levels of comedy. There are 7 levels that every comedian falls into. Level number 1 is open micers. Level number 2 are your feature acts. Level number 3 are your headliners who work in clubs. Level number 4 would be the guys that kind of work in theaters. You've seen them on TV. Level number 5 would be the ones that have their own comedy shows, or like on TV, like a Cristela, thing like that. Level number 6 would be the guys that work the arenas, and that would be your Gabriel Iglesias and Kevin Hart's. And then you got level number 7, and those are your comedy gods. That's Carlin, Pryor, Steve Martin, Lopez. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Lopez would be level 7.
Roy Lopez?
No, not Roy Lopez.
George Lopez. Hey,
Junior,
I think a lot of people, especially Hispanics, look up to him and think that they put him up there at number 1. I don't know.
Yeah,
well, he had a TV show, so I mean, he made some level up there.
Okay,
right?
but you know what? Let me clear something up. He had a TV show, but you know who banked the TV show?
I do not.
Sandra Bullock.
Yes, Sandra Bullock.
Well, okay.
I mean, of course,
So she thought he was funny, and
when we were doing the Cleto show, even Longoria was our bankroll, and then Tony had to go mess it up by getting a divorce. There went our sponsorship.
I might have to beep out some of these names. Okay. Beep, to protect the innocent.
But
add in some other names.
No, that's amazing. So I guess the question was, why did you want to get out and then get back in?
The reason I got asked because it was just hard being on the road. Because when I was working, I was literally on the road. I would say maybe 40 weeks out of the year.
Wow, you're like a band.
Yeah,
That's
the only place to get work. I mean, if you're going to be a comic,
you got to commit.
You got to travel because you can't stay in whatever city you live in and do comedy all the time. Because number one, eventually everybody's going to see you, and it's not like even
isn't that the whole idea?
Well, even in a city of 1 million people. You can't sustain yourself.
We're almost at 2 billion. We're at 1.8 as of the last year's the population of San Antonio.
Oh, the Metroplex.
Yeah, we're getting close. Yeah, you're right. That makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
I can imagine. And did you? I mean, you had to. I mean, you drove.
I drove.
Wow.
I drove. I had a 2000. My last car was a 2004 Chevy Malibu with 282,000 miles.
Wow.
So I drove that one into the ground, and that car has been to Michigan 4 or 5 times.
But one thinks about why did he drive himself? Because it's probably the cheapest.
It's absolutely the cheapest way. Yeah.
Because if you go a rental car, you're spending miles and stuff like that, and if you do flight, well, it's
Well, I can just imagine the drive to Guantanamo, though.
So one of those amphibian cars.
Those
gigs were great. Those gigs were great because the pay was a little bit better.
I was going to ask about that. I mean, obviously they're pay driven, and I would. And you traveled alone.
I did most of the time. I traveled.
See, there's absolutely no way I could even fathom that because I bore myself.
Every week I'd be working with a new comic. Somebody I didn't know.
Well, that's why I find it amazing. A lot of times we'll have a discussion at some of our comedy workshops, and people will drop names, and all these people, or you've worked with them at one time or another. Speaking of working with some of these comics, who's probably in your mind who's like the most famous or the most what comic stands out more than any others who have made it?
You're listening listening to a special edition of Southtown Comedy Radio Show with Roy Lopez Jr. Stay tuned for part 2 and hear more of conversation with world-touring comedian Jesse Pangelinan.